Let's begin, though, with NVIDIA. Jensen Huang delivering the keynote last night at CES. A lot to unpack. This is what he had to say about the Blackwell GPU and where it fits into the company's AI picture.
You get this incredible graphics card here, Blackwell. We're going to shrink it and put it in there. Does that make any sense? Well, you can't do that without artificial intelligence.
Not just AI, Jim, but physical AI is all the talk.
You talked about the evolution. I've got to tell you this. Physical, the first thing I'm going to say is that there's just a huge amount of people saying Amazon's gunning for NVIDIA. Well, they play good game of chess. No, they play checkers. After this, Amazon's a checkers play. Jensen's playing chess.
So what does that mean?
Well, because Amazon, well, the big reason why Amazon, that Amazon's supposed to be gunning for NVIDIA, right? Microsoft's supposed to be gunning for, good luck. He left that behind because he's doing physical. So what he's doing.
Well, wait, just to stop. What you're talking about is the development of their own chips. Is that what you're saying when they're gunning for them? But they use NVIDIA chips as well, but they also use ARM-enabled architecture for things that help them in the data center.
These guys are using Micron for high bandwidth. No, I'm saying, welcome back, first of all, because I'm one of those guys like the guests that come on, if you hit them, they say, well, first, I really enjoy
it. Guys. I like your time.
Okay, thank you.
Beautiful.
Great. Okay, that's not here nor there. All right, so here's what's going on. There have been a lot of scrum about who's doing maybe inference, and then Amazon's moving into training. NVIDIA's not talking about any of that. NVIDIA's talking about robots. They're talking about the way you build a factory. They're talking about physical. They're talking about Toyota going the way that Tesla's going. They basically just said, you and I are going to have robots. I don't know if Corey may get a robot, maybe not.
Well, he keeps talking about the ChatGPT moment, right, for robotics. Others have been talking about that a bit as well lately.
Yeah, but
Jim.
Yeah, but no, my point is that he's leaving everyone behind.
Okay.
And that's why its stock can go higher. Because if we're doing physical, what that means is that you are going to have a robot that is going to be doing exactly what we can do. A robot will be able to talk. It'll be able to be our buddy. It'll do things that we hadn't been able to think they could do. And this is what this is about. This is about productivity and robots. Now, yes, the PC that we showed, that's going to be for sale for a very good price. I think that's going to be very competitive. And maybe there's really going to be AI. But I was just blown away by the digital twin for manufacturing, the Toyota being like Tesla, the humanoids. Remember, he keeps using the humanoids. They even threw a bone in for Apple Vision Pro, which the downgrade says is a bust. Okay, fine.
I saw you mention that earlier.
But I just think that it was about not being the Jensen Huang that we've been hearing about, that he's this, even though he did have the incredibly cool leather jacket.
Yes.
I don't have that one. But I just think that this was dazzling in intellectual purposes, not showman purposes.
You mentioned the Toyota partnership. There's the Uber partnership, too. And he spent quite a bit of time talking about autonomous. Take a listen to this.
After so many years with Waymo's success and Tesla's success, it is very, very clear autonomous vehicles has finally arrived. Well, our offering to this industry is the three computers, the training systems to train the AIs, the simulation systems, and the synthetic data generation systems. We're working with just about every major car company around the world. Waymo and Zoox and Tesla, of course, in their data center, BYD, the largest EV company in the world. 100 million cars built each year, a billion vehicles on the road all over the world, 1 trillion miles that are driven around the world each year. That's all going to be either highly autonomous or, fully autonomous coming up. And so this is going to be a very large industry. I predict that this will likely be the first multi-trillion-dollar robotics industry.
Okay, so who's been a huge customer? Tesla in the data center. Notice he said the data center, he didn't say the car, because they're not making the ones for the car. But if Toyota does that, Toyota has the balance sheet to do it, they're going to have to buy they may have to buy 500,000 chips to get this done. So you're looking at orders from now till kingdom come. Now, over and over and over again, he says, we're ready to ship. We're Blackwell's ready to ship. We're Blackwell shipping volume. So therefore, you want to put the numbers up right now. I thought there would be people who say, you know what, I've already heard this. Remember, that's the new thing. When we have it, I go over with
we
NVIDIA
knew this, quote
to
unquote.
say, well, okay, which is the new? Which is the new? David, there's a lot that was new. It just wasn't Jensen just going wild. There's no wild. And by the way, you know what it started with?
Tell me.
A bartender mixing a drink.
Well, you've talked about that a number of times when you were there for that, right?
Well, no, I'm just saying that I was spot on that. Like Jensen might listen to the show.
As we start this year, there are a lot of. It could be an amazing year for advancement in various areas of technology, whether it is robotics, as he said in this ChatGPT moment where suddenly all the things you've talked about start to come to fruition that we all have talked about. There will still be significant advances made in AI itself. I mean, Sam Altman quoted in a recent interview saying, well, one of the, in the next 4 years during the Trump administration, we're likely to get to AGI. He said that.
Yes.
Interesting to see him sort of discuss the next 4 years and artificial general intelligence being reached, which is the reason that they even created OpenAI, of course, way back when. And autonomous vehicles as well, and the advances that are going to be made this year. There's a lot that we're going to be, as we have been for years, but it may now start to happen. The question is, what's it going to mean for the enterprise?
Right.
What will it mean for companies in terms of use of robotics? What will it mean for AI in terms of intelligence being used in the enterprise to help efficiency and productivity?
I'm going to Verrazano bridge you.
Okay.
The reason why you do the Getty Shutterstock, this thing can read video. It's just a killer. I mean, this is the type of thing that I would never allow. Say, if there's like a guest on earlier. This is like these two should be competing against each other. Instead, this is the video. See, they can. Let's say you wanted. This is the picture. I've often mentioned that. If you want to know how to strike out every single player on the other side, you just, the robot can do that because it ingests video. It's a big thing. So you want pictures. Getty was mentioned to me by Jensen. I owe him a SPAC. But David, the deals that are happening.
We got 4 at least on our docket today to talk about.
Yeah. All right, let's turn to NVIDIA. The shares are a bit lower right now. It did hit an all-time high yesterday. CEO Jensen Huang speaking last night about the massive opportunity in robotics. Take a listen.
The ChatGPT moment for general robotics is just around the corner. And in fact, all of the enabling technologies that I've been talking about is going to make it possible for us in the next several years to see very rapid breakthroughs, surprising breakthroughs.
Our next guest was at that event, the CES in Las Vegas, and he describes it more like a rock concert than a tech CEO speech. Dan Ives is Wedbush Securities analyst, of course, joins us now. Has a buy on NVIDIA, price target's 200. Good morning, Dan. Let's talk robotics and autonomous technology. You say in your talking points or your review of the speech, that alone represents another $1 trillion of incremental market opportunity that NVIDIA can now tap into over the coming years. How do you get to that number, and how do you derive the value you are for NVIDIA from it?
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, I think Jensen laid out the strategic vision for the coming years. When we look at robotics, autonomous, I mean, I believe ultimately those are going to be some of the biggest use cases of AI. And I think what you saw from NVIDIA last night is they're not just sort of going to be a provider. They're going to play a huge role in this sort of vision. And obviously, Tesla on the autonomous side continues to be front and center. I think this is the next step. I think this is a snapshot of the future. And you look at it incrementally. You go out the next few years, I think Street's underestimating growth by 25, 30%, which is why I think not just $4 trillion, you could be looking at $5 trillion market cap.
Underestimating growth by 30%. What is it? Is it robotics? What's being underestimated, so to speak, in terms of the growth for this company?
I think one, it's Blackwell, just overall from a demand perspective. We think 15-to-1 demand to supply in terms of what we see. I think when you look at robotics and autonomous, given the market opportunity, that could ultimately be 15-20% of what I view as disruptive technology. I mean, that could be an incremental 20-25% just to the top line over the next, call it 2-3 years. I think that to me was the sort of watershed moment last night. It's Jensen laying out NVIDIA. It's not just about Blackwell chips, the new oil gold. It's about where this is all going. And we believe autonomous and robotics, that's a huge part of the fourth industrial revolution.
Right. So what does a ChatGPT moment in robotics look like then, Dan? What does that mean?
I think physical AI. I mean, we've talked about from Robotaxi Day in October. I think we're going to be looking next 2-3 years. Robotics is not just going to be from CES, it's going to be real. And I think it's something that's going to play out in factories. It's going to play out in consumers and households. And I think a year from now, we start to go more advanced prototypes to something that's going to become a reality. And I think that's the key here, is that we are still in the early days of the AI revolution. And there's only really one player. I mean, it's NVIDIA's world. Everyone else is paying rent. That was a flex the muscles moment from The Godfather last night.
What about what I was just talking about, Dan, which is higher yields and the fact that all those stocks are down today? I know you're excited about the fundamentals and the innovation here, but does it make you question valuations when we are seeing a rate move like this on some of those ideas?
Yeah. No, look, and that's the push and pull, and I get it. But my view, Sarah, is that we have $2 trillion of AI capex next 3 years. And even when you look at tech, look at Microsoft just going to 80, from 44, basically doubling their capex. You look at numbers, you could say valuation, but I think it goes back to, I think earnings and ultimately top line growth for tech is being massively underestimated into the next year or two. And that's where the growth is. This revolution is not going to be stopped in a 10, 20-bit move on the 10-year.
Let's stick with NVIDIA and how the street is reacting to Jensen's keynote last night. Joining us this morning is Stacy Rasgon, of course, senior semiconductor analyst over at Bernstein. Stacy, great to see you again. It sounds like you're not really willing to draw a line between the keynote and the price action today.
No, I don't know. I thought the keynote was good. We can argue there was nothing new. You got to remember there was new stuff, and they have their GTC event coming up in March. We'll get a lot more on their next generation of data center products. But look, they told us Blackwell's in full production. We know it kind of needs to be. It was very nice to hear that. We had new gaming announcements. I thought the price point in particular on the lower end, when the 5080 was very interesting at $549. New automotive announcements. They announced Aurora. They also announced Toyota as AV partners. Lots of innovations around physical AI. You mentioned the Digits workstation. There was a lot here, I think, for people to get excited about. I don't think the price action today really has much to do with anything that Jensen said or didn't say yesterday. I think the stock was at a record high. There was some macro and rate points and maybe some profit taking. They're not the only ones that are getting hit this morning. So, but I thought in general, Jensen always puts on a really good show. I thought it was a good show.
Yeah. As for the upcoming catalysts, whether that's an analyst Q&A or JP Morgan Healthcare or earnings next month, what do you think is going to be most important?
It's like anything else. People want to get conviction that the roadmap is stable, given like there's been some noise around the Blackwell launch, just given how complex those products are. Again, knowing that it's now in full production, it gets so many different sites, I think is important. But people want to get some confidence on that trajectory. And then I think as we go through the year, again, we've got they do have a Q&A in CES today that I'll be attending. They have, I guess, the JP Morgan Healthcare. They've got earnings, and then they've got their own GTC event, which happens in March in San Jose. I think there's plenty of catalysts in the near to medium term to give people more confidence, not just on the current roadmap from this year, but also the future roadmap. Because the biggest concern that people have is just, and I've said this before, the numbers have just gotten so big so quickly, they just worry about sustainability, like how much longer can it go? And so anything that they can give us on the state of that future roadmap and the sustainability of these kind of numbers, that's what people are going to be looking for.
What about the robotics? He showed examples of the Cosmos being used to sort of simulate activities inside of warehouses, and this sort of, and I've talked with Mark Benioff at Salesforce about agentics and the future of robotics and the future of work. How should investors think about that as a potential catalyst in this entire Gen AI cycle? Is this a new wave of demand?
You'd hope so, right? I mean, in general, like stepping away from robotics for a minute, just people want use cases. There's been a lot of spending, particularly in the cloud at the hyperscale level. And I think just in general, enterprise adoption, there's a lot of experimentation going on, but we haven't seen anything like super broad-based yet. And so developing applications that are going to utilize the enterprise at the consumer level, at the enterprise level, I think is going to be very, very important. I think robotics is potentially a huge one. I mean, clearly, right? There's tons of work going on right now, not just industrial robots, but as well as he showed humanoid robots. Yeah, I could imagine that's something that if you're looking out 5 years, 10 years, as that goes mainstream, that could be another enormous opportunity. Like think about the unit volume of that could sell as automation.
Are the other chip companies doing this, sure. Or is it just NVIDIA?
There's lots of folks that are working on this. I don't think anybody really is pushing into these types of applications, whether it's robotics, AV, agentic. Nobody is really pushing in and developing not just the hardware, but also the software stacks and the ecosystem to the degree that NVIDIA is. And I mean, everybody talks about their mode. I mean, that is their mode, right? And they've been doing everything they can. They haven't been sitting on their laurels. They've been pushing the envelope on all of that stuff as we go.
That's for sure. Creating new markets all the time. Stacy, thanks. Talk soon.
You bet.
Stacy Rasgon over at Bernstein.
The price action today in NVIDIA is worth starting with. You had all this optimism last night around CES and that speech by Jensen Huang, and here we are with a rollover. What do you make of that?
So it's a good question. I try not to make too much of it. Keep in mind, this is a stock that has been on an unbelievable tear. It's gone up a lot. It's not completely out of character for NVIDIA to have a negative 3, 4, 5% day. It does happen. But I do think a lot of people pile into it knowing that Jensen Huang is going to make a keynote address. They expect to be wowed by the technology itself, which I think we could all agree absolutely accomplished the wow factor. But then it's like, all right, the trade's over. Let me get out of this. I made whatever I made. This is very common. This is buy the rumor, sell the news. So I would just leave it at that. If you tell me this is the start of the next 20% drawdown in NVIDIA, okay, that's a different conversation. Well, I don't think we could extrapolate today's weakness into something like that.
You know what I find interesting, though? I was almost going to start the show asking you if you thought this was the next, just to use your words, 20% breakout for the stock. Because, you know, what happened into CES was notable. The stock had basically been dead in the water for a while. It's been picking up lately. Yep. Past history would suggest that the stock not only gets a CES bump, but in the subsequent days as well. Jensen Huang's not done speaking out there, but this is a notable rollover. And I was going to say, is this the breakout or the breakdown? I don't know. Maybe the market's voting right now with its hands, saying that stock was up a lot in a little bit of time after doing next to nothing for a while. Maybe here comes another breather.
I think it's tough because, you know, people anticipate these things and they trade far ahead of, when you would think there would be profit taking, or maybe the CES bump is what happened in the 10 days leading up to CES rather than in the 3 days after, which people have become historically accustomed to. So it's really, really difficult to look at the price action and try to read into the thought processes of, I don't know, 100 million people who are buying and selling the stock for various investment portfolios. I think the thing that's worth saying is that you did not hear anything at all in this keynote address giving you some sense that there was some slowdown in innovation or demand, or that there were any hiccups in this story. If anything, we're now thinking about 26 and 27 and the onslaught of physical AI announcements that will be coming. This year is the year of agentic AI. I think that's pretty clear. There's a consensus in Silicon Valley that this is the product people will buy and pay a lot of money for right now. The robotic stuff is a year later or a year after that. But what Jensen Huang did was he waved the checkered flag. He's not doing things in order. He's showing people what they're going to be selling products into 18 months from today. And look, if you're a long-term shareholder in NVIDIA, as I am, it's now my largest position again because of how much it's just gone up. I could live with 5% pullbacks. They don't affect me. They don't faze me.
So, Rod, I mean, the stock, over the last couple of months, down 4.5%, right? It's kind of doing nothing for a while. This month alone, it's up 5.5%. So you get the rollover today. To Josh's point, it's not like, Jensen Huang was on the stage last night and announced that there was anything wrong. Au contraire, mon frère. I mean, it was the exact opposite. Dan Ives talking about what happened yesterday, a slew of new AI technology. PCs that will further stretch their enormous technology lead versus the rest of the semi and big tech landscape. Goldman highlights the company's ability to innovate at industry-leading speed across hardware and software. Stiefel, the developments is further deepening the company's competitive moat. The superlative after superlative after superlative about what this company has going on. But yet you have the roll in the stock today. Do you think it's related as big tech is down because of the move in rates?
I do. I think you're getting some movement out of some of these mega growers. And again, it's interesting because it happened on the announcements that were really good. I mean, you're talking about a company that is going back to gaming, it's going back to robotics, and it still is so strong in AI. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to probably be dead money or up and down until earnings. And that's where 26, 27 earnings are going to be really, really important. And because you don't have as much recurring revenue in a stock like NVIDIA as you do as some of the others, I think the execution story is going to be really important. The story itself is fabulous, right? He has laid out, as Josh said, what is the roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years? Where are we going to play? And these are all the players. And Scott, if you remember back in 2016, NVIDIA was a gaming stock. Nobody thought it was an AI stock. So I think this is kind of a really good way to say, hey, if I'm going to own this stock, it's trading at 30 times earnings. So it does have to execute, and it does have to say our earnings momentum is going to increase.
Look, the sell-off in NVIDIA, the stock is up 188% in the past year. It trades at 48 times earnings. Fine, if they're going to grow into that earnings, go for it. But 91% of the sell side have buys on this thing. That is really, really a popular trade. And we all know I'm the only one on the desk that doesn't own it, but I own Broadcom, so I'm fine with that. But everyone owns NVIDIA. So I think that this is a sell the news thing. AI fundamentals are still incredibly strong. And so if you see a pullback, I mean, you want to look for opportunities because, I mean, if you listen to what all the companies are saying, it's that you're seeing a 30% increase from AI, a 30% increase in productivity and efficiencies from coding, right, and engineering, a 20% decline in costs on the fulfillment side. Remember, Amazon had that meeting about a month and a half ago, and they talked exactly about all this and the power of it. And you're starting to see monetization from the big players,
hey, that's
right?
Why. But that's why you've had money going back to the big cap tech.
My point is that you're going to look for opportunities. NVIDIA is up a lot. It's over-owned.
It's not up a lot in the last couple of months. It was up a lot.
But up 188% in a year,
Well, there are a lot of stocks in this market, though, from the growth space that make that gain look paltry.
Well, I mean, some of them, but for the most part, tech had an amazing year last year. Mag 7 had an amazing year last year, especially in December, right? And then they slow down a little bit. So, I mean, I think you see this rotation happening within technology, but I don't think you want to be afraid of when these things pull back. My point of giving you these stats on AI is that it's real. We are all talking about the $1 trillion total addressable market. It's real. It's coming. And maybe it also, according to NVIDIA, it starts to expand into other products around the world, quite frankly. So it's just a bit extended, in my opinion. By the way, so is Broadcom.
So from a fundamental perspective, let's look at NVIDIA, right? So you bought the dip because of CES. Great. Now, it became the largest stock in the world for a little bit, and then for about 5 minutes. But here's the issue with NVIDIA. Amazing name, love it, but relative to the other big mega caps, it by far, from a fundamental perspective and technical perspective, is the most volatile. So you have to be able to live with these ebbs and flows. Now, so I think that's why, from a longer term perspective, what's going on here, whether we start to see the semblance of a range happening in rates, when people are worried about inflation or rates going higher, they're going to seek the liquidity trade, full stop.
I mean, tech's getting just destroyed today. NASDAQ's down 440. As I asked you that question, saw 2.25%. Many of the biggest names, obviously we led the show with NVIDIA hitting this record high, crossing Apple for the largest market cap company in the world. Now I look at the lows of the day down more than 6%. Right. Where's this trade going from here, according to the charts?
Well, I'll tell you, NVIDIA is really the standout for semis, right? When we look at semis, and we've been more cautious on semis for at least a quarter now, NVIDIA kind of being the exception to that rule. That's still an uptrend. I think there's a ton of support down around 125, so that's good news. But when we look at semiconductors, holistically, from everything from Qualcomm to Intel to NVIDIA, the group's not that strong, and so I think there is a cyclical component to to it. They're as overvalued as they were in our work back in 2000. Then NVIDIA barely existed. It was more the Qualcomms and the Intels of the world. So just as a reminder to viewers that technology is cyclical. There are new winners and new losers in every cycle. But I do think that of what we're seeing in technology, I do think semiconductors are one of the more vulnerable spaces. We're focusing our efforts and suggesting to our clients to remain in software and to look at adding to exposure there. They look better.
NVIDIA plunging after hitting a new record early in the session. CEO Jensen Huang just wrapping up an analyst Q&A in the past hour after unveiling his AI roadmap. Christina Parts-Nevelis joins us now with all the highlights. Christina.
There are a lot of highlights. Let's start with supply and demand, because that was the first question that I got from Stacy Rasgon, who's often on our network. And they confirmed that they're not changing their guidance. They are shipping both Hopper and Blackwell this current quarter, which fiscally ends in January, the end of January. They said that they probably will do a bit more, but they weren't going to change the actual number for guidance. And they said supply will always be a situation. There's nothing we can build that will be unlimited. So that's for the Hopper stuff, because everybody really wanted to hear about the data center sales that we didn't really get in the keynote yesterday. For future growth, they spoke to two major drivers. The first one is general purpose computing is dead. Hand coding is dead. He's saying that all of these data centers, which we've heard before, need to be updated. And he was, dare I say, a little bit not aggressive, but maybe more affirmative in all his commentary, saying that if you're not putting accelerated computing and machine learning, you're doing something wrong. It makes no sense. He went on to say if you don't have just AI within your system, all of his software engineers need to use AI chatbots. They mandate it, and that was a quote. So he went on to say that if you're not incorporating this into your business, into your cars, into your manufacturer, then you're behind and you are going to lose. That was the tone that I got from this entire Q&A.
He talked yesterday in the keynote, and what's interesting is that he had this Q&A, and yesterday he had the keynote. Analysts were very bullish in reaction to the keynote. And one of the, there are a couple of areas, the robot, right, which who knows, how commercial that can actually be, and then the GPUs for the laptop. And I was wondering, for the laptop, that didn't seem necessarily like it should be a growth area. I mean, who wants to be in the PC market at this point, unless it's a corporate PC?
Well, I guess the argument he would make is that they're creating these personal supercomputers so that researchers, students eventually can do everything in an office, in a research facility or a university. For the actual laptops, he did. And this was an interesting line. He said, I'm going to have to wait to tell you, when he was asked specifically on the Q&A part if he was going to be entering or expanding within the PC market. So that leads me to believe that maybe he is going to announce something at GTC in March or at Computex in Taiwan. But it is a market that won't move the needle for them that much, considering data centers contributes 88% of total revenues. Gaming is about 10%. PCs, we know the refresh cycle has been very slow. Look at AMD, look at Intel. So it's a good point.
Christina, just the announcements were, I think, as bullish and positive in tone as you could have expected. It seems like a lot of these dynamics and things were discussed are somewhat long-tailed. So as we think about what's in it for the market right now for a stock that, is it priced to perfection? I don't know. I actually think that it's not priced to perfection, but I know that that's an easy criticism, that there's not a lot here that really is for here.
Yeah, there was only two notes that I read today. Then one of them pointed that it was not going to have a near-term impact on models because it's really contingent on data center revenues and all that. And to your point, maybe that's why the stock did sell off 6%. But then the bulls will argue, no, think about it. The company just hit an all-time high. Why are we so aggressive to find, or trying to pinpoint a reason as to why it was down so much, why it was a laggard on the Dow, why it was a laggard on the NASDAQ? I think, though, there's some truth to it. That's what was missing yesterday, and it is the hype, but in his commentary, this is the future. And if you're not getting on board right now, if every single EV is not going to be autonomous, and that's literally what he said, it's not going to sell.
It's a good-looking snakeskin jacket, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Tom Ford, $8,990. It's currently on sale on the website. For the Q&A, he did shift away from the patent. No, I don't. I don't know who you're hanging out with.
There's some tech bros that made a lot of money in the stock.
I think a lot of millionaires at NVIDIA, I think, according to a Forbes article. So very possible, but I think we can get the imitations maybe on Shein or Temu. But
So a couple of things stood out at me. Talking about, the the chatbot, the agents, all of that. But then the shift into the physical, how manufacturing writ large will be absolutely transformed, and how much learning needs to go into that, which seem to be sort of setting another stage for, maybe not to your point right now, but in not so long and for a long time, that's going to need a tremendous amount of compute.
Yeah, that would utilize their Omniverse product that they're expanding, and what that creates is a virtual world to your digital world. So if you're a manufacturer or if you're a car, you can literally simulate the real world on your computer and not have to actually stick the car on the street, and you can figure out all of these possibilities. And so that's how you'll get all of the synthetic data. And so to your point, that hasn't really evolved yet. So that'll be a whole other level of extra data for large language models to train on. And that's the argument for those that say that scaling is, hasn't hit a peak, and that scaling law is another debate when you get a little technical, is, there's not enough data. Well, in this case, Omniverse is going to allow them to provide all of that with the digital twin. And you can do this in a manufacturing warehouse as well. A lot of companies will eventually have to deploy this, so you can see where your box is moving, how productive this section is compared to this section, the speed of which products are being executed out on a runway. I don't know what the word is.
Manufacturing line, whatever.
Conveyor belt.
Product line. Conveyor belt, thank you.
All right. Christina, thank you.
Thanks.
Christina Partsenevelis. All right, record high, reverses, closing the lows of the day, 2.5 times average daily volume. Katie.
You never want to see what we call an outside down day, which is what that was. It's an all-encompassing price bar that takes out the previous day's low, and then you see a weak close. So that is a short-term setback for NVIDIA in particular. We did also see it, sort of widely among technology stocks today. And we feel like the market, with that in mind, is somewhat fragile. And we'd just be really mindful of short-term support levels. So for NVIDIA, we can see some support around 134 in our work. Resistance is pretty evident around 150 on the chart. And the stock has been losing upside momentum since the summer months of last year, but thankfully it hasn't led to a breakdown yet. So we're watching that support closely.
So the 100-day is 132, the 200-day is 119. We're a long way from 119, but with NVIDIA, it could happen overnight. We're used to this one-way moves. But I think what you were talking about, it's almost like Back to the Future. They're talking about what got them here. So gaming, we're not talking about their major customers anymore. We were talking about Uber and Toyota. Not Microsoft, not Google, not Amazon, not all the things that got everyone excited in the last year, sort of what's a smaller piece of the pie. So Christina said, data centers are 88%, gaming is at 10%. So if you look at that, why are we concentrating on gaming and PCs that are a very small piece of the pie and not the growth areas?
To be fair, this is a keynote at the Consumer Electronics Show.
Yeah.
So the keynote could have been tailored for that.
Well, it was client-side stuff, right? So and which is a much smaller part of their business, which I think that's exactly who the audience is. By the way, they probably love the jacket there because that's the kind of people that showed up there.
In Vegas.
But I think you get back to it's great to point out the charts. I think, in fact, we all would think about 2025 trying to look at it through the lens of what happened in 24. First 3 months of the year of 24 were all about semis. I think it's going to be another great year for semiconductors. I think it's a year where we're going to start to see the broadening of that semiconductor trade, and we started to see that even with Broadcom as we got into the last couple weeks of the year. But the trading action here is something to be worried about, especially when you think about how little cash, I think, if you look at fund manager surveys, the market overall has, and how much mega cap tech led that spurt into year end, which we know stalled a bit. So I wouldn't be jumping off the train here, but I think you could be short-term cautious.
First, you don't look like Guy, but you sounded exactly like Guy with the outside reversal, the volume, all of that. So I get that. I mean, I'm still, I still think there's a longer-term story here, so I'm staying in it. Yep. NVIDIA sold off. It started to sell off when we got that data at 10 o'clock, which I think was important for the market, not in a good way, right? We get higher rates, and then obviously, future cash flows get discounted and become smaller. So that, to me, was a bit of a bummer. I think that rates sort of came back into focus again. They've been shifted, higher, and now, is it really going to be a problem? I hope we see rates level off.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. Today was a rough day throughout the market with the S&P finishing the day about 1.1% lower and NVIDIA finishing the day down about 6.2%. I'll be completely honest with you. I thought that because there were two more NVIDIA events scheduled for today, one this morning and then one later in the afternoon, I thought that because of this, traders would hold off temporarily on selling the news. But that was not the case today. Today at market open, NVIDIA sold off heavily. And then at 10 a.m. Eastern, we got economic data that caused the entire market to trade lower. And this only exacerbated what was already volatile downward price action in NVIDIA. I want to briefly mention that economic data so that you're aware of it. Most of the economic data we got this morning was fine, but the one major problem was ISM prices. Notice that the consensus estimate for ISM services prices was 57.5, and ISM services prices came in at 64.4, more than 10% higher than what was expected. This caused market participants to panic and reduce their bets on future Fed rate cuts due to worries that inflation is making a comeback. And as I said, this only made NVIDIA's downward volatile price action worse. As for Jensen's keynote last night and the financial analyst Q&A this afternoon, I seriously think everything is completely fine from a long-term perspective. I think today's price action in NVIDIA is just swing traders selling the news, and the subsequent downward price action was exacerbated by a bad economic data point this morning. The long-term thesis surrounding NVIDIA remains strong, and I would argue that it's even stronger now than it was before CES. Jensen clearly articulated that NVIDIA will be pivotal to the major technological innovations of the next 5+ years, including AI agents, autonomy, and robotics. The world's infrastructure and applications in these massive industries will be built on NVIDIA. That is the takeaway from CES last night. We are still in early innings. At the financial analyst Q&A this afternoon, we were told that both Hopper and Blackwell are shipping this quarter and deliveries are going well. All in all, everything is still in place for NVIDIA to continue to see substantial growth for at least the next 1 to 2 years. The next two major events for NVIDIA will be earnings on February 26th and NVIDIA's GTC on March 17th through the 21st. GTC is when NVIDIA is likely to reveal news about data center products, which is where NVIDIA makes most of its revenue. CES was focused on consumer electronics. GTC, on the other hand, should focus more on the data center and enterprise. I expect GTC to be more of a market-moving event for NVIDIA than CES, so that is something to look forward to. The hyperscalers are still increasing their capex on AI. NVIDIA still has a massive competitive moat that stretches across both hardware and software, and we still have a solid product roadmap from NVIDIA for 2025 and 2026. As long as everything remains peaceful in the Pacific, and as long as none of the hyperscalers significantly reduce their capex, then I think NVIDIA should be just fine for at least the next 1 to 2 years. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.